The harder the conflict, the greater the triumph.
A fiercest serpent may be overcome by a swarm of ants.
Lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. Age wrinkles the body, quitting wrinkles the soul.
Battle buddies.
Battle buddies.
Leytes. Have you been reading it as Leyte, or
That was my big
lady?
question.
I've heard it pronounced differently,
Yeah.
but this is how it goes with history.
I've been doing Letty. No, not Letty. Not Letty.
It's hard for me to say Leyte because it makes me feel like I'm saying ladies, but in a weird way, like, hey, Leyte.
What's that word when you say a word too many times and it loses its meaning? Weren't you telling me about that?
Like the word sorry?
Yeah. God. Letty's what I've been saying. That's wrong, huh?
But I don't feel like you're leaving out the Y if you say Letty. I originally read it as late. Like I'm late. Oh, look, you got a map.
Yeah. I have a few maps.
That's nice. I've been into maps lately.
Yeah.
I like maps.
Can you explain your map system of like how,
What do you mean?
like, because in my head, when you described it to me, it was you like sitting on your bench press, like doing curls.
Oh, no,
and
no,
then
no.
like just staring at a map being like,
No,
yeah,
in my
that's
gar-
where Taiwan is.
I literally just bought a world map that I'm going to place probably above like my washer and dryer in my garage. And in between sets, when I'm like drinking some water, I'm going to be like, oh, that's how you spell Denmark. I don't know.
Denmark's the one you get stuck on?
No, Denmark's easy.
Yeah.
It's just Denmark. But maybe, I don't know. What's a complicated country to spell? Czechoslovakia.
Czechoslovakia.
That's a hard one.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Also, I wouldn't know if you spelled it correctly.
No.
Some words that you know, you're like, oh, that's clearly spelled wrong, but you got close.
It's like Schwarzenegger's last name.
Yeah.
That's a name.
So we just had Memorial Day,
Well, it is Memorial Day.
It is Memorial
We
Day
are recording
today.
this on Memorial Day.
and you encouraged me to go to VA like cemetery.
How'd it go?
It was wonderful. I took my grandpa who served in the Navy. Got a little picture here. We went to the Northern California Veterans Cemetery in the middle of goddamn nowhere. And it's like hella sketch because you go through the city.
Is that, sorry, I'm
Idaho.
interrupting. Is that your grandpa on your mom's or dad's side?
My mom's side?
Okay.
Yeah. So you go through the city called Igo, which is like 3 trailers long, and there's there's one store and it says Igo store, and I learned from my aunt that it was a bar before it became a store. So
Of course it was.
that's what Igo has going for it. And so you drive through there and you're like, I'm clearly not going to a nice place. And then it was really nice, and we learned all about it because my uncle, I guess, knew the guy or heard of the guy that they donated all the land so that they could put a cemetery there.
Did you see a lot of flags today at the cemetery?
Yeah, and so I'll show you this. I'll post these on Instagram too, but they also put red flags for killed in action.
Ooh,
And
interesting.
I really like that because when we walked around and saw,
Was there a lot?
yeah.
Were they recent?
Well, that was what was interesting. Like this one that I was a Marine, and I think his was from, oh no, this one in the Marine was sobering for me because it was 2008 in Iraq.
Recent.
And I was like, well, and it's the year, I graduated high school.
We were 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was graduating high school and this guy is dying in
Dead.
Iraq. Like,
Yeah.
fuck.
Not even, no clue this person exists.
Yeah, and I saw one from like 2012 from the Persian Gulf, and like I felt really bad because I couldn't even place in my mind like what happened in the Persian Gulf
So
in
like
2012.
perhaps special forces. Did you look it up?
I didn't look him up, no. Yeah.
That's interesting. I found out today, and I never knew this, full disclosure, but were there any like coins on top of the like
Yeah, so
pennies or nickels or dimes?
Yeah, so on some of the graves there were, and then they have, what's cool about that cemetery is they have monuments for each of like the branches or like of different wars too.
That's very cool.
And so there's, my dad and my grandpa were explaining to me like there's the pennies and there's the nickels,
Yeah.
and there's different types of coins for. Do you know them offhand? Like what like ones like you served with him?
So a
or you
penny
knew
means
him?
you visited it.
Okay.
That you're like, hey, I just came here and I'm good. I like saw it. A nickel you went to boot camp with that person.
Oh, okay.
A dime would be that you served with that person, like overseas, I
yeah.
believe. And then the quarter means you were there when they were killed in action.
Jeez, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And I just learned that this year. I never knew that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of little stuff like that. I like it. It's like Easter egg stuff. That's fun.
Absolutely. Well, and I think like for me, like the most sobering experience, because we were there on Sunday morning, and I realized like it was kind of nice because there weren't a lot of people there, except for like people that clearly don't like crowds because of probably what they experience in like places like Vietnam or somewhere. So, you know, we're walking around, this guy comes up in his motorcycle and just walks up to a grave, just stands there for a little bit shaking his head, and then walks back. And I was like, holy shit, like this was like a weird promise thing that he's like committed to himself, and he doesn't want any accolades, he doesn't want anyone to know he's doing it. He's just, that's what he does for his buddy. That
gave me chills. That's epic. I saw a lot of people out there by themselves at Green Valley today too, just like staring.
Yeah.
The 1,000-yard stare, which is a new thing that I learned about. Have you heard of the 1,000-yard stare?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I never knew. I mean, I actually, I think I read about that in the On Killing book, but it like straight up, there's like a science behind it, right? With the 1,000 yards, your pupils are dilated. Your like blood pressure is super high after seeing combat and things like this, and you have the 1,000-yard stare. You basically look like a lifeless soul person.
I've never read like the medical symptoms of it before.
It's a real thing.
Yeah,
there's an actual thing. Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Battle Buddies.
Yeah. Well, okay. So there is positive that came out of it. So, and then my grandpa, he's like really soft-spoken guy, but he served on the Midway when he was 17.
That's crazy.
So 1962, and then he pulled out his Midway yearbooks.
What?
And I'll post some of these, and he's kept like all these photos of him.
Oh, dude,
he loved his tour. Yeah. So he traveled, and like it was awesome.
Oh, dude, these are epic, bro. He kind of looks like he's in prison.
Yeah, right? When you look in the yearbook, like he's
got a tattoo?
Yeah, so him and his buddies, him and like 4 buddies from high school got their parents to sign them off so that they could join the Midway or join the Navy together. And so they all got tattoos before they went out.
That's hella cool.
Yeah.
Dude, those are cool. Thank you for sharing that. We should put that on the medias of the social variety.
Yeah, we'll put those up. Yeah, that's him on the printing press. Pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's hella cool. The Midway. No big deal.
All right. So enough positivity. Let's go into the shittiness of
war.
Leyte Gulf.
Yeah, welcome to Battle Buddies. This is our second battle that we are deep diving. My name is Spencer. This is Kevin, and we are doing the Battle of Leyte Gulf in World War II. And you know, normally it would make sense to start with like the beginning of the war, but we went straight to the end.
Yeah,
we went straight to the climax.
Yeah,
because the climaxing is the best part.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I go. You know, it's a race to the finish line, and I always win.
You got to get there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about how weird this battle is before we even get going. So I have a little thing that might help us. I'll start with a little quote to kind of give us some context here.
I like quotes.
So, all action takes place, so to speak, in a kind of twilight, which, like a fog or moonlight, often tends to make things seem grotesque and larger than they really are. So that's from Karl von Clausewitz.
He wrote a book about military strategy, right? Like tactics?
Yeah, okay. And I first heard about him last week when you and I were nerding out about wargaming, and I read that book from the Ministry of Defense on just what wargaming is and how NATO is wargaming right now. It was awesome. And then I tried to apply to a wargaming position at Annapolis, but you needed top secret clearance for some reason.
I had one of those.
Yeah.
A TSSCI, bro.
So I wish I would have had one because I was a shoo-in. I'm sure of it. I'm sure they wanted an English teacher.
It's better to get top secret clearances when you're younger in life because the longer you wait, the more shit you have to your like experience.
If they had to interview everybody, like, can Kevin handle secrets? I don't know.
No.
Maybe one time.
He went to Long Beach for school, and no. I would kind of like to say, prior to us like really getting into the guts of this, that I kind of want to just preface like, with everything going on in the United States currently, we're recording this on the 30th of 2022. I kind of want to just say, like, we're not making this show to, like, glorify war. We're not doing this to, like, romanticize violence.
I want to. No, I'm just kidding.
You know, I don't know. I don't want people to go by and say, like, oh, cool, a podcast about war. I mean, Kevin and I definitely chose, like, the social science topic or category of our show for a reason, rather than just like, hey, come listen to us talk about people dying. That's
Right.
not really our goal. And I feel like that's important given all the intensity of things currently happening. And I'm obviously not going to go into the politics of everything going on right now,
Right.
but I just feel like it's important for people to know, like, if people were to be like, are Kevin and Spencer pro-war? I would say anti-war?
I've not read one of these war books that I've read so many of this year so far, and being like, that sounded like something that was cool.
You know what? Good for them.
Yeah. Let's do that again. Like, can we recreate that for fun?
I'm proud of our history.
Yeah.
I'm proud of all the history of mankind just fighting each other.
Well,
So-
and that's kind of how Clausewitz, his book is heavy. And he kind of goes into, I mean, he's pre-nuclear and like pre-dreadnought era, so like it's definitely not saying war is the worst, but it's just war is a continuation of politics. And to me, it's just like, oh, that's just a failure of politics, right? To some degree, like politics have failed, and so now we do the terrible thing that started by nomadic tribes trying to get water, right? Trying to share water.
Yep,
trying
I
to share
appreciate
resources.
this analysis.
Yeah.
Anyway, I interrupted your introduction here.
No, yeah. So I was thinking about Clausewitz. I like that. So that's where fog of war comes from, and I like that because,
Is that really where it comes from?
yeah, it comes from this dude.
Interesting. I
And
didn't know that.
what's interesting is that, you know, all of my experience of the term is from video games, which was literally fog, so you can't see the enemy. So I always assumed it was about not knowing. And what he's describing here is not that. And it's really like opened my eyes to not being as harsh on some of these characters we're going to get into over the next several weeks as I wanted it to be. Because what he's talking about is things look grotesque and large in the shadows and in the fog. Because they get just little pieces of information and then they have to like think about it like, well, that could be something enormous or nothing. And like, how do you know which one it is? And so that is totally different from like in a video game where it's like, and you can't see what your enemy's doing. Like, sure, that's scary, but that's not what they're saying. They're saying, I got a ping, and that could be a storm.
Could be a whale.
It could be a whole bunch of boats.
In your mind, when you think video game and fog of war, what video game is coming to your mind when you?
Well, the big one right now is Civilization. 'Cause
Okay.
I've been playing a lot of Civilization to try to understand
That's what
Japan.
and how do you feel you understand Japan?
Less. I didn't get to where they got to, and I was like, I don't get. You guys went totally left when I went right, and I don't get it. But they don't have an option for extreme nationalism in Civilization to the level that they get to.
Probably for a good reason.
Yeah.
That's probably fair.
So when looking at the context required to explain the Battle of Leyte Gulf, it is easy to keep backing up until you are at the beginning of the universe itself. The battle has been called the largest naval battle ever. The battle included hundreds of ships, hundreds of planes, multiple layers of commanders, countless miles, several days, mountainous egos, heroic efforts, terrible judgments, and thousands of human lives. The battle reports are full of contradictions and biases depending on the perspectives you are reading from. So instead of trying to fit such a battle into a nice box, we're just going to focus on specific interesting moments.
That's, I think, wonderful. So, yes.
Okay.
I also would like to do, before we get really started, like hardcore into it all, and everyone's like, I don't understand any of this. And we're going to say, neither do we. Are you familiar with the term bluff, bottom line up front?
No.
It's basically, in the intelligence field, a stupid version of the thesis.
Okay.
And like it's in a sentence typically. And so when I went into Spotify and typed in the Battle of Leyte Gulf and I listened to all of the available episodes out there to make sure that we weren't going to do the exact same thing that's already been done, no offense to any of the people listening who made an episode on the Battle of Leyte Gulf, but I did not walk away from those episodes like, man, I really understand the Battle of Leyte Gulf. And so I do want to, before we go, just like briefly describe, and you can do it in your words and I'll do it in mine, a thesis / bottom line up front as to why and what this was for.
Right.
And so what I wrote here as for people like, what's the Battle of Leyte Gulf? Why does this matter? Blah, blah, blah. From my perspective, after all the reading I've been doing, Leyte Gulf was essentially the last bit of a Japanese imperialist stronghold that provided supplies for an already dwindling and crippled Japanese army / navy. The Philippines also paid MacArthur the equivalent of today's $8 million to return and liberate them from the Japanese.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, dude.
That didn't come up.
That I found out from Twilight of the Gods by Ian W. Toll. And so MacArthur's motives were not necessarily altruistic, and we're going to get real deep into that. We're going to be talking a lot about General MacArthur. But this decisive battle won the U.S. the Pacific War in World War II. This is the climax of World War II, and we wanted to liberate the Philippines. Would you say that is essentially what this battle is for?
Yeah, what do they call it? It's like a coup de grace. So it's the death blow to the Kaigun, which is the Japanese Imperial Navy.
Yeah, coup de grace is. I've never heard that term.
Is coup de grace or whatever? Coup de grace.
Oh, is that what that?
Yeah, sorry, coup de grace.
Okay.
This is one of those things where I've been like reading it, and I'm like, I don't have to worry about saying it.
And here we are recording a podcast about it. No big deal. All right.
Let's go over just our main sources too, because that super matters for me in this one. So mine is the book that I was reading, The Battle of Leyte Gulf, The Last Fleet Action by Wilmot. And just if you're thinking about reading it, like if this is your first book on Leyte Gulf, don't read it. It's really interesting, but his writing is atrocious. And
really? Is it rough?
it's like from just a rhetorical standpoint, like, okay, how do I describe it? So he fights every like agreed upon point ever in this battle, which is cool. So he'll, let's say, like, and people criticize Halsey for this because of this reason, but there's 5 points that they don't consider, and then he goes through them, which is cool. I like that. Except for that, normally you would just, like in an academic writing, you would say first, and then tell me the point. He, points 3 and 4 are in one sentence together. Point 5, he never says is point 5, and it's a whole paragraph later. So, like, it's really hard to track him. Like, I'm like sitting there like almost diagramming out his sentences because they're all like compound complex sentences. I'm like, well, you don't need this many independent clauses in one sentence about how much oil Japan has at this very moment.
Kevin is also an educator.
Yeah.
So that makes sense that you would be doing that.
God, I don't know how else can read it. I don't know how.
That makes me feel sad, dude.
Yeah. But it's really, the problem is that it's really, like, he does do his research. Like, 30% into his book, he's on footnote like 200.
Yeah.
Because he's just done. He's going over all primary sources and just like is really picking it apart, which is awesome.
Yeah. The books that I've been going through are The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors, The Extraordinary World War II Story of the U.S. Navy's Finest Hour by James D. Hornfisher. And I've also been picking apart Storm over Leyte, The Philippines Invasion and the Destruction of the Japanese Navy by John Prados, which is more of a naval intelligence and Japanese intelligence book. And then I also have been listening to Twilight of the Gods by Ian W. Toll, which is probably the most epic out of all of them.
Okay.
And then I have been, depending on certain things that I find in the literature, I found a website called World War II Database, which has been super awesome.
Oh, I think I've been on there a couple times.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
I have been, this will come up more next time, because next time we're going to talk about Halsey and all that controversy around him.
The singer, Halsey?
Halsey. Is it Halsey? Is that the dude's name?
No, it is.
Okay.
I think of this singer every time I see his name.
So for him, I've been going through this guy's thesis. It was a U.S. Army Command and General Staff college, and it was a Master of Military Art and Science, Military History.
Oh, he wrote that?
Yeah, this guy Kent Stephen Coleman. It's really good. It was like his master's thesis or something like that, and it's all about. He's writing from Fort Leavenworth, and it's really interesting. It's all about like how much blame do we put on that guy, how much is it not his fault, and it's pretty well done.
Nice.
So that'll come up next time, not so much this time.
All right. So for all of you who are wondering why we're able to say some of the things we're saying, like General MacArthur got the equivalent of $8 million to go back to the Philippines. He was paid by the president of the Philippines. You're like, whoa, where'd you learn that? From a book.
From books. They're awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you're asking about like, why did this battle happen?
I would like a thesis / kind of little bottom line up front for people to understand, like, what's the point of Leyte Gulf and why Leyte Gulf?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll do it from perspectives. So they both share the same perspective in that, and I'll get into this in just a little bit, but this battle specifically is because America is trying to cut off Japan's access to oil, which is at red line already, and it comes up a little bit with like how many knots the boats can pull when trying to get into formations, and like they can't go past certain speeds because they're gonna run out of fuel. And so like,
wow,
I'm like, that has to be pretty extreme. So I think like that's the big thing of why they want here. And then Japan wants to, like, okay, this is a hot take, but it's not really a hot take because I'll show you the sources from Japan. But Japan's military wanted to die.
What?
Yeah, pretty fucking nuts. And
that's not great.
yeah, it's not my favorite. Like, it's like a blooming death flower thing. I'll read it in just a minute. It's fucking crazy. That's why my next subheading is called "Why is World War II era Japan so fucking weird?" Yeah. So, and from America, it was that they had just a month, or at the beginning of October, taken out 600 Japanese airplanes in this area. So they're like, well, we either fight Formosa, which is the island above Leyte.
Taiwan is formerly known as Formosa, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Or we go Leyte. So MacArthur wanted Leyte because he wanted to, I shall return.
Right.
And Nimitz wanted Formosa.
It also seems like Nimitz...
We'll talk about it. Okay, let's go north. So, let's go into...
Where like as Dan Carlin says, where does a story begin?
Yeah, seriously. That's why I said...
Where do you start a story?
I was like, I don't know how to begin.
It's really rough.
Is it Carl Sagan? It's like, if you want to make an apple pie from scratch, you have to create the universe. Like, where do you begin? Like, where is scratch?
This is one of the roughest... For you and I to go from Thermopylae to this,
yeah.
we have definitely put on quite the feat here.
Yes.
This is intense. So if you've made it this far already, I'm proud of you guys, for whoever's listening.
Yeah, so let's go into why is World War II era Japan so fucking weird.
All right, let's do it.
For like the full comprehensive answer, you should listen to Dan Carlin's Supernova in the East, parts 1 through 6. It's like 20 hours.
Yeah, it's long.
It's super long. It's like, I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm re-listening to it all again, and like I'm like gripping my chair while I'm listening because I'm like, no, they can't do that. Like, they're gonna fight to the man, like the whole nation, and it's nuts. The Spark Notes version of it is that Japan made a choice to resist global colonization by becoming a colonizer itself. That's my hot take, and this was called the Meiji Restoration because they were in the Edo era. They were closed off. Some American gunboats came over and were like, no, you're open for business, right? That kind of thing happens. So then they create the Meiji Restoration. What's important about that is that they develop and refine the most impressive national identity I've ever heard of anywhere. And that national identity will be taken to extremes, especially in the last part of Leyte Gulf that we'll cover on our last day. Because I think this is going to be 3 parts.
At least.
And Japan, because of this, even though it's a small island nation, is going to be able to compete on a global scale.
So, trigger warning.
Right, seriously.
If you are sensitive to some really...
It won't come up today.
I do kind of, just because Saipan takes place before Leyte. And so
Okay,
when
yeah,
we're
okay.
talking about, your question here is, why is World War II era Japan so fucking weird? There is definitely a moment in a lot of our like island hopping campaigns where the United States military was thinking, this isn't really like us though. We're not like each other. So I'm telling you right now, for any sensitive ears out there, trigger warning, things of suicide and
Right.
death and kamikazes will be spoken about in the next couple of
Yes,
episodes.
absolutely.
I was watching on Netflix World War II in color, which
Okay.
is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I watched the Philippine campaign
Oh, really?
episode, yeah, which is a precursor to all of this.
Yes.
And they talk about Saipan, and
Okay.
I know that this is like a very last podcast on the left thing to say, but this shit affected my sleep.
Yeah.
Watching, because you're sitting here talking about the national identity was taken to extremes and Japan was able to compete on a global scale, right?
Right.
They didn't want to be taken hostage.
No. It came from that's what makes the whole thing so confusing, and why you should listen to Dan Carlin carefully talk about it, because in the beginning you're like, yeah, fuck all the other colonizers. You should compete. Like, that's what every nation should try to
Right.
do. And then when you're in episode 6, you're like, just calm down, though. But then when you compare the two moments, like, you juxtapose them, you're like, oh, like, they had to. But where's too far? Like,
So when it shows like Marines going to Saipan and trying to liberate
Right.
civilians,
right?
farmers,
No.
they're trapped in these caves, and the Marines brought translators saying things to the effect of, get out of the caves. We're going to blow these caves up.
Right.
Get out. And they stayed in there.
Yeah.
They did not surrender. They even got to the point where, because they didn't want to get captured, moms were throwing their babies and infants off cliffs.
Yeah.
And one scene in this World War II in color, which again, I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to have their entire month affected.
Right.
It shows this Marine, he after this woman throws her baby off of a cliff, she grabs this Japanese mother and like takes her to this group of kids and Japanese kids that are being fed by Marines.
Right.
And she realizes that she could have saved her kid. And the Marine says, I watched her mind break in front of my face.
God.
So I say all of this to kind of just put into context the type of spirit of
Right.
these people that the United States was fighting. And we're going to get into it a lot more in the future, but I definitely think, and maybe you can expound upon this, that the Japanese commanders and people in charge, I think, definitely viewed their pilots and military as really expendable.
Right.
Whereas in the United States, we were like, these are the best. We want to keep these guys
Right.
around as long as possible.
Right. Yeah. It's I've read some stuff on it in like comparative like social psychologies, right? Like looking at like national identities, and I think most of it comes from like China, but about how like the sense of self is different, like literally because of the different cultures, your sense of self is different. And actually Freakonomics has that whole series on why is America so America, or why is America so unique. And their basic point is that America is an individualistic state, for better or worse, and that in a place like Japan, especially in this time period, they felt part of a whole. And so their life is of less consequence if it serves the purpose of the whole. But then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that you, as a commander, I think would be a terrible burden, because if you make that happen, you can never go down to 80, right? Because you're at 100 the whole time, sacrificing those guys for the greater good. But if you ever cool it down, then you're going to get these families and these other people being like, well, then why was everybody sacrificing? So I think like it fuels itself into extinction almost.
There's an interesting psychology there. I was just watching for Memorial Day weekend on HBO, the Generation Kill, which is about the initial push into Baghdad in 2003.
Okay.
And it's about recon Marines. And civilians die in that, and on the Iraq side.
Right.
And it shows this kid that these Marines killed in a battle.
Jeez.
And it shows this dad just, being like, I want to just take her through so I can bury her properly. And like, man, the dad's not really, doesn't really seem upset. And the interpreter is like, grieving is different over here.
Right.
It's not like the United States. It's a completely different, and that goes into what you're saying about like the psychology of all of it. I do also, from what I understand, I don't remember particularly what source I heard it from, but I do, from what I understand, the things such as kamikazes and things of this nature were, there was a lot of lying to when it came to Japanese men coming into the military. They weren't like, hey, by the way, kamikazes are going to be a thing.
No, yeah.
They were, you have to remember these were orders given to these men.
Yeah.
This was not necessarily can't wait to die for my country scenario.
Right. No, yeah, they definitely, at least because Dan Carlin reads some letters from a pilot where he's just like,
a Japanese pilot?
Yeah, he's just like, all right, guess this is what I'm doing today. Like, they kind of get trapped later on in the war. But, yeah, that whole thing is crazy.
It's fucking intense.
Yeah.
It's fucking really intense. So, fun stuff over here at Leyte Gulf.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, okay. And what is interesting that I want to talk about, too, in terms of, like, how to look at Japan's Navy at this time, the Kaigun, is that when they were going through this Meiji Restoration, were training with different militaries, and so they were training with Germany a lot. And I was reading that wargaming manual from NATO, and they were going through Germany in between World War I and World War II, where essentially they just like locked this group of people into a room and had them war game out how quickly they could do things, and they figured out that they could take France really fast and that no one would be ready for it. And that's essentially what the Kaigun, I think, learned, is how to war game out crazy fast blitz, like a crazy fast blitz idea. Like, I'm just going to fuck shit up really, really fast. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to do things in a way that they haven't thought of because I've been wargaming and theorizing and theory crafting, like everything. Because they're the ones that figure out that carriers are the game 4 years ago or whatever, 3 years ago at this time. And then 1944, America has caught up, which sucks for Japan.
Yeah.
This is super confusing, the command structures of the whole thing.
Give it to me.
So Japan had issues with its command structures. They have a couple main guys, Nishimura and Shima. They're like the big guys in it. And
did you say they're commanders of like the Pacific Fleet for Japan, essentially?
There are two of them. So Kurita is the head one, I believe.
Would you say that it's the equivalent to sort of MacArthur in this kind of scenario, or Nimitz?
I don't know. It's so weird.
It's different.
It's just a different, like, they can just freaking like do whatever they do. Like, when I'm reading through the transcripts and like, and same with America though, like it's the same thing. Like, do they follow it? Sometimes they just ignore it. Like,
gotcha.
So it's just really weird. But anyway, like, there is definite beef that's noted between Nishimura and Shima because Nishimura like didn't want to be below Shima. And then the book that I'm reading, he's like, and why is Kurita in charge? It should be Real Admiral. And he just starts giving out these other names of like no-name people from Japan's Navy that like, so I'm way deep in nonsense names that I have no idea like who should be in charge, who should not be in charge. But I have taken away from this that it was confusing and that they didn't do a good job. Like, there wasn't like a linear tree that like flowed, especially for when battles happen. Like, I understand having like not having a top-down system for command in like everyday life. Like, I don't need to like have to like go up the chain to solve my problems.
Right.
But when like someone's literally dropping bombs on me and I'm running out of fuel, it would be nice if I like, who do I talk to about this? Like,
yeah.
Who's the guy that like helps me make sure I'm in the right place now?
Man, that's an interesting point that you bring up. I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people and I was talking to my buddy about this recently, but a lot of people get out of the military because they're like, man, dude, there's a lot of idiots in charge of me.
Right.
There's a lot of straight up fucking morons in charge of me. So.
And then, okay, so this is not to say the U.S. didn't have the exact same issues. Because there's another issue with Japan's army and navy not wanting to help each other to like an extreme, like their fights in the war room stuff.
Interesting. Not working together.
Not working together. And the army and the navy in America were as different as MacArthur and Nimitz, who are the leaders of the army and the navy at this time period. And then it gets more confusing because Kincaid, who's in charge of the 7th Fleet, reports to MacArthur, but Halsey is going to report to Nimitz, who's the other main commander. So you have two commanders reporting to two different commanders in the same battle in the Philippines, which is just lots of islands.
Okay. So it's essentially the way I would view this in like mad layman's terms is it's a huge game of telephone.
Seriously.
Yeah.
No, it really is.
Okay.
And people not answering the telephone because that comes up a lot. like this guy, this author that I have, he's telling you the exact times when people send the information.
Whoa.
And the exact times when the other people definitely got it when it was logged, and then if they did anything with it. Dude.
So this is a scenario. This is nothing like Thermopylae.
No.
We're like we have Herodotus, so this is all really just kind of us guessing. You have to understand, people have been dedicating their life's work to getting a lot of intelligence documents declassified, so that we can sit here and look at this shit 2020, and it's so stupid. We're like, wait, these aren't intelligence reports. These are dumb reports.
These are stupid. I will say, okay, for the sake of listeners trying to keep things straight, I'm going to keep trying to come back and like simplify things because we don't need to try to sort this out. That's for military historians to do. We can keep things confusing and just pick apart the things that make sense to us. So for us, I would say, and I don't know if you disagree, that for Japan, I'm focusing on Kurita because he comes up a lot, especially in the first 2 days. And in terms of like being in charge of everything. And then Halsey is going to be the main guy for America until what's-his-face comes in, Kincaid.
Yes, just know that other names are going to pop up.
Yeah, right. That's exactly what I mean. There's going to be lots of other names, but like those two names are the big ones. So when you hear Kurita, like, oh, that's like the big Japanese fleet. Yeah, okay. But then there's this great dig, which is there have been comparisons between the USA and Japan commanders are not too common. Not as common as I would have thought because of all the similarities that I'm seeing. But Kurita was once described as the only person in the Pacific War able to make Halsey appear intellectually gifted, which is a sick burn. It's so good.
Wait, speaking of sick burns, may I ask, who was the Japanese general who was hella tall and was apparently very ugly?
I don't know.
Toyota? Not Toyota.
Was it Toyota?
Ozawa,
the Northern Fleet. Ozawa is fucking crazy.
He's like 6'3".
That makes sense because he wants to be a decoy, so he's standing up on the boat.
No, truth be told, I've seen pictures of him. I don't think he's that ugly.
Nah,
I was like, dude, you're fine. You're chilling.
Yeah.
I've seen uglier. Oh, man.
All
okay.
right. And then, yeah, we don't have to go into all the... There's like a whole bunch of stuff on like Nimitz and MacArthur like fighting each other about do they go to Formosa? Do they go to Leyte? I don't think it's...
I think the main thing that we can say about that is the famous story of Franklin Delano Roosevelt came out to Pearl Harbor, which was like a really huge deal because he was in a wheelchair.
Right.
So he had to go by sea, I believe. Right.
Really?
He couldn't fly.
So Nimitz took him out?
Huh?
So Nimitz took him out?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
That'd have been a cool move. Take him out yourself.
Oh, it would have been Formosa instead because Nimitz would have been like, here's some cigarettes and here's some whiskey. I don't know how they.
Is that how Nimitz talks?
Here's some whiskey. Yeah. That's another. Have you heard any speeches from MacArthur? Have you heard what he sounds like?
No.
Yeah, me neither.
I assume he's bombastic. Like I assume he's just this larger. All the stuff I read, I'm like, you are the worst human.
Yeah, dude. He's a lot. And apparently he was, well, from what I heard, he was only really on when the cameras were on him.
Right.
Apparently, other than that, he was kind of just whatever, a tool, apparently. But anyway, the famous story is Franklin Delano Roosevelt comes out to Pearl Harbor and meets up with Nimitz and MacArthur, and they have a meeting. And this, from what I was reading in multiple sources from my books, and they've recounted this story, it doesn't sound like Nimitz says shit.
No, Nimitz is super quiet.
Quiet, yeah.
He doesn't say
and
anything.
MacArthur, and he's like, I think we should go to Formosa because reasons. And MacArthur's like, we're going to Philippines. and then Franklin Delano Roosevelt, apparently, and I kind of appreciate this as from a president, and I feel like I would kind of be the same as a president. I'd be like, well, you guys are the generals. Like, this is what I hired you to do. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know what I'm talking about when you do you see the intelligence reports every morning. Right. I'm worried about, I don't know.
Yeah, and he has to keep the industry alive because I forget what it is. I'll have the stat at some point, but America's making a new airplane every 300 seconds or something.
Right.
Which is
it's insanity.
Nuts.
It's insanity.
And that's how we win the war, and that's all Roosevelt cares about, just making jobs and making planes.
So I essentially think the biggest takeaway from the whole...
You've been in that meeting. I've been in that meeting where you're Nimitz, and you're like, no, I think the right idea is this. And then someone's just wearing a leather jacket for no reason and being like, actually, I think. And then they just talk for an hour, and you're like, well, I'm obviously not going to talk anymore because that didn't work.
Your meal's done.
Yeah,
You've
exactly.
had 4 cheesecakes and 2 cups of coffee.
I just open a book and I'm reading.
Yeah. Though I think the whole point of this story that should be taken away is that MacArthur gets what he wants.
He does.
He's like an only child who just is like me. He gets whatever he wants.
My note says, ask Spencer, how did MacArthur finally get Nimitz to change his mind? What did he do?
$8 million?
Yeah, seriously. I'll give you one of them.
Oh, dude, probably.
Right?
He probably bribed the fuck out of him. Because what it sounds like from my perspective so far is Nimitz was a more calm, cool, and collected, calculated man.
Yeah, he seemed cool.
Yes.
He didn't strike me as MacArthur. And I don't know. Originally, it's I hate MacArthur, obviously. But this is a confusing time. And they are dealing with very hard things. So I don't know.
I think the American public clung to the MacArthur image and the persona. And I also think that the Philippines did as well. I think.
Right.
So that's that. That's all that we need to know about that.
Yeah, so let's go into battle plans. And this kind of goes into your idea of what's the thesis behind it. So by October 1944, both sides were aware that the key to Japan's navy for the rest of the war was related directly to its replenishment at sea, which is called RAS capability. In other words, Japan needed oil in a big way.
Yeah.
And then it comes to this other thing where the 7th Fleet, which is what Kincaid is in charge of, the 7th Fleet intelligence, they worked out that any force coming from Singapore, which is where some of Japan was right now, their navy, would have to be refueled en route to the Philippines. So this is why Nimitz and MacArthur were arguing over Formosa or Leyte as the site to cut off Japan. They knew, and this just goes to even though there's going to be so many dumb things that happen, their intelligence, in terms of what they can deduce between each other is pretty incredible. They're we don't know that much, but I know that they're going to have to refuel at this place by this time, and we can go here, and if we come here and take this, they're fucked forever. That is a huge assumption, right? They don't have that they don't have that fact. They have somebody like you sitting there writing and I wrote a long essay. I think it's true. I don't know.
You're essentially a lawyer, dude, trying to make your case. I do, after looking at a map,
right?
I think that the Philippines was a smarter move. Obviously, sitting here hindsight, winning the war, it was the Philippines was a good choice. But Taiwan's super far north,
right?
Especially from Singapore, as you're speaking about here, for refueling and all that stuff.
Right.
And the Philippines is made up of a bunch of archipelagos.
Archipelagos. We got it now.
We should just name our podcast Archipelagos.
Yeah. But Spencer was telling me that there was a ship called Archipelago on a video game he was playing to prepare for this podcast.
It's a level.
Oh, it was a level?
A level called Archipelago. And guess what? It was gorgeous.
Was it?
Yes.
It's nice.
Yeah. My brother and I were playing World of Warships today. Turns out that free game is a blasty blast.
Nice.
Love it. And there's tons of ships from the Leyte Gulf on there.
That's cool.
Also, side note, I went and saw Top Gun. And they're in the CIC, that blue room that you always see on Navy commercials where it's like, the Navy is the best thing you can join it. You're going to be in a blue room and it's going to be awesome. And you're going to be doing top secret things. They're in that room. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm chewing on some popcorn, minding my own. I'm like, yay, Tom Cruise. And all of a sudden I hear, blah, 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 Leyte Gulf. And I was like, whoa. And my brother, the same thing. But they obviously weren't in Leyte Gulf. It looks like they're in damn near Russia because there's snow everywhere. There's a ship called the USS Leyte Gulf.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So continuing on battle strategies here. So Japan... So that was America. I think they did a good job with that. Like, kudos to intelligence teams. Like, it is so impressive to me watching people work it out. But I was impressed too with the Greeks, right? In ancient Persia, how much they worked out like decisive naval combat, choke points. Like, I just think is really interesting when your life is on the line, what you can deduce. But then the risks that people will commit lives to, like, I don't know.
Well, let's think about for a second. From what it sounds like, the Japanese main source of trying to get shit done is not running out of oil.
Yes.
And the main view from the United States is, let's nip this in the bud.
Yeah, let's just get rid of their oil.
Let's win the war.
Yes.
Whereas Japan is like, we're kind of just barely hanging on here.
Right. Okay, yeah, because that goes into something that we're not going to talk a lot about, but there is a subtext here that took me forever to figure out, which is... Because it didn't make the clear connection to me, like how this will stop them from getting oil. But part of it has to do with you have to escort all those fucking oil tankers everywhere. And so Japan needs to keep a certain number of ships near Japan. And so if you're at like Formosa or at Leyte, you can then launch strikes directly onto the mainland of Japan. So you're going to have to not be able to protect your tankers, which thereby makes you have less oil. So, like, essentially, we've cut out the trade route for oil to them, which maybe that was intuitive, but, like, I did not get that forever.
I mean, can you correct me if I'm wrong here, but the extremely short version of Pearl Harbor, the reason for Pearl Harbor was because we cut their source of oil?
I have no idea. I still don't know what Pearl Harbor was
I'm pretty
about.
sure.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, they blew us up because they were like, you're not supporting our imperialism with more oil. We will, and they also wanted to, destroy our fleet so that they could boost up their navy and supplies and things.
Well, and we got so lucky because that was essentially, I personally, my little headcanon here, that was going to be their version of blitzkrieging through like France. Like they aren't ready for it, and we got lucky that we didn't have all our carriers there. Because in my head, it's like, they don't know how good carriers are. And so if we just have carriers, take out all their carriers, we're good.
Yeah.
But, okay, so that's not to say Japan didn't have good ideas because, well, I mean, you can decide for yourself if you think they're good ideas at this time. So Japan figured out it could only contest control of Leyte within 2 days of a USA landing. That's super interesting to me, that they did figure out how many days they had as a window to contest control of one of these big islands, like Formosa or Leyte. But, and this is going to get really weird, so by the Kaigun's own calculations, it could not fight such a battle off Leyte if it was more than 2 days. And so Japan initiated these 4 plans, which they call the Sho Ichigo battle plans.
What does show mean?
I don't know what the Sho
Victory.
Ichigo... Does it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the Shogo battle plans. Show means victory.
I didn't know that. Yeah, so there's 4 for the different islands.
Mm-hmm.
And that was cool. I was like, damn, like, so it's not just that they're... Well, I'll get to the next part because then it gets
Turns
weird.
out these battle plans were not victorious.
Well, I mean, it depends on what they wanted. So these were 4 separate battle plans that it had prepared for previously regarding various islands in the area. Japan wanted a coup de theater, or I don't know if that's how you say it.
Coup de theatre?
Yeah,
I have
something
no
like that.
idea. And then coup de grace over here.
Yeah, coup de grace. And to explain that, so on October 18th, this is primary sources here. The command wanted a fitting place to die and the chance to bloom as flowers of death. This is the Navy's earnest request. This is to say that Japan wanted the decisive battle. It is reminiscent to me of what the Greeks wanted against the Persians, but it was perhaps less optimistic. The Kaigun's air strategy was to present the American with so large and diverse a defensive infrastructure that it could not be neutralized. In other words, they did not mind losing their whole navy to this because they were not going to win anyway in the long term. And their plan was to get as many airstrips as they can in the Philippine area around here so that they could just keep airplanes up all the time, just kind of messing with Americans, and that maybe we would not win. And then they would get a big decisive battle at some point. Weird.
There is a level of bravery,
Seriously,
to that, but also there is a level of bravery to surrendering.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It takes a brave man to say, I can't do this.
Right.
So it's frustrating to see things that you were talking about, like a fitting place to die and the chance to bloom as flowers of death. Like, come on, dude. You're just saying you're going to lose. That's a nice way of saying we're going to lose.
That's what I'm saying. Because, again, if you haven't heard our earlier ones, I'm pretty sure that if I was, like, drafted in World War II, I would be the mailman. Like, for sure.
You'd kill that shit.
They would be like, Kevin, get this letter to this other guy. I'm like, cool, I don't have to shoot anybody today. And if I'm on the boat and I'm just giving letters to people and stuff, and, like, I hear that on the intercom, I'm like, fuck? What do I have to do? I have to bloom like a flower of death? Just trying to get this letter here so I can go home.
Right.
Got a kid. Yeah. Pretty crazy.
Dude, so we have friends, and one of our friends, her mother was born in Japan.
Okay.
And so I asked her today, as a white man obviously would.
Right.
I was like, can I ask you like really personal questions about your...
Is this like another one of your bad questions? Like, how was it being a POW? Like that great question that you asked?
She was super okay with it.
Okay.
So I was just like, your mom was born in Japan, right? And she was saying, I was like, did her dad or grandfather fight in World War II?
Right.
And so her grandpa fought in World War II.
Okay.
And essentially, like, from World War II, he was on a Navy ship in World War II, and essentially wandered off into obscurity in a different island somewhere. They never saw him again.
Whoa. Like Hiro Nakamura. What's that guy's name? Is it Hiro Nakamura?
I don't know what you're talking about.
This is why you should listen to Dan Carlin's Supernova in the East again. Everybody that's listening. He starts off by talking about this in the 70s. They fly in this old general who works at a used bookstore now in the 70s to force the last remaining Japanese soldier who's staked out in the Philippine Islands to surrender because he's still killing people and fighting. And it's 1970 something.
What?
Yes. Because they were told, like, this guy's story's crazy, and this just goes with this national Meiji Restoration thing. The story is that his mom gave him the family dagger and said, kill yourself with this dagger if they catch you, to like save your honor, essentially. And I have thought a lot about that because I can't think of another culture in another time period where a mom would do that for her son. Because like the parent primal instinct in almost every other culture and almost every other time period, and I would say Japan now would be the same as us now, with this like, no, my kids are my future, so they should outlast me. And
100, I will go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
It's exactly that. And so like this was the exact opposite of that. And
Wow.
Like it's brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's wild that happened to him. They did that.
And it's in theory.
Yeah.
Again, like, he kind of just never came back. There wasn't like we know for sure he died. It's just,
No,
he
yeah, they
never
wouldn't.
really came back.
Yeah. Because their idea was
terrifying.
Japan's idea, essentially, from what I understand, was like spread itself into as many islands as they can,
Right.
to make people not justify the cost of clearing the islands, which is awful.
Turns out things went a different way.
Yeah. to explain geography really quick, Leyte Gulf is part of a chain of islands southeast of China.
Archipelago.
It's an archipelago, that's right. I said chain of islands because I wasn't confident in archipelago. I'm good at it now. On the left of Leyte is the South China Sea, which we know all about now.
Yeah, dude.
Very far
I
away
got
from the
real
Suez Canal.
excited when I saw the Southeast China Sea.
And on the right is the Philippine Sea. And then Japan would be like northeast, right? All right. I have so many tactic questions, but I don't even know. I don't know if I'm going to go over all these right now. Maybe we'll go into them as we
Maybe they'll
go
work
through.
their way in.
Yeah. The one I do want
organically.
to talk about is like the oil is a big deal right now, but like why did America choose this time to push for victory? And it has to do with America's industry, like their industrial strength. And essentially what this author that I've been reading that he does really well is just explicitly show you that America has two Navy fleets. It has the interwar fleet, which was the original fleet in 41, and that fleet in Japan have fought themselves to mutual exhaustion. More so on Japan's side, but still we took heavy casualties in Pearl Harbor, right? There have been hard fought fights on both sides. But we have industry and we have land and we have resources. So we have created in this 3 years another fleet. Mm-hmm. And Japan has not.
Yeah.
And so like their ships are like torn up. They don't have experienced pilots anymore.
So that's a huge part, is the experience of pilots as well.
Yeah, and they just lost 600 airplanes like 20 days ago. So long term, it should just be a slam dunk for America. It doesn't really go that way, but it should have been. Like it that was a huge advantage.
Yeah.
But then we talked about the fog of war. Like things look different when you're in the fog of war.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different small, what would seem as like minute differences with our advantages over the Japanese. For instance, our fastest ship went 33 knots, I
Right.
think, something like that, and theirs was 27.
Right. But I don't think they ever went 27 knots, though.
Really? Because of fuel.
They went mainly
man.
15 to 16 knots.
Because to not burn enough.
And then when they try to get, like, when you read about them trying to clear out of a battle to, like, reformat, or, like, they get a better formation, they'll go, like, 20 or, like, 23 knots.
Oh, no,
and that's
dude.
only for, like, an hour, you know? That's not...
I know that our pilots were also trained. They had to have at least 350 hours in the air, whereas
Yes.
Japanese pilots were only 200.
And we started sending... This was a big deal. We had enough survive conflicts, and we started rotating them back to America to train new pilots.
There you go.
And that was a huge deal.
Of course.
Because then we had people able to share experience in a safe environment, come out, and they were able to do really well. That kind of stuff really like turns
It's huge.
In terms of years of combat, that really matters.
It's huge.
The other thing on just battle tactics, well, two things. One is that the formations, like I was looking at like Japan's formation, it's 3,000 miles long.
What?
Like, yeah, when you look at the actual formation, like how long their line is, like when they form.
What good does that do?
Well, this is the era of the dreadnoughts. Like, this is the era of battleships and cruisers and destroyers.
Right.
And what does America commit? We commit like 130, 150 boats. Like, that's how, and you have them space out, you know,
3,000 miles?
because they're trying to control Japan, Philippines,
Yeah.
and their oil lines.
Basically all of that South China Sea nonsense.
Yeah, they're trying to get Taiwan. I think that's where they're getting their oil from, and they're trying to get it up. And just, that's tons. That's a huge battle line. There's no way. Especially because they have not many boats left. Okay, and then the other thing is, I wanted to ask you, so they talk a lot about the screening techniques. Like, they just did screens all
Like
the
the
time.
smoke screens?
Well, I don't know what it is. And so...
I found out from playing World of Warships, bro.
Oh, really? Okay.
Swear.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you what I think it is. And then you need to... And this
Well,
is,
we're both probably not going to be, dude. There's going to be some, a lot of Navy captains listen to this show.
this is going to be really good is that people in the military and people that play sports are both going to hate me for it because I'm going to give you a sports analogy, which is really good because I've only been running my life. So like that's a good. I obviously know how organized team sports work.
You played a lot of basketball.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about basketball.
You watch more basketball.
I've
than you
watched
play.
a basketball game.
Who's in the playoffs this year?
Are the playoffs going on right now? I could not tell you. I could not tell you if basketball
We're
is going
from
on
Northern
right now.
California. Does that give you any hint as to who might be in the playoffs?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't tell you. I
The
still.
Warriors made it to the end. Well, we're going to be playing Boston, just so you know that now.
Are the Warriors a Northern California team?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. This is good so far. This is good for me. I'm looking good.
So please go on
Yeah.
with your basketball analogy.
So in the screen, they have to screen for the carriers. That's what they talk about. That the cruisers and the destroyers.
Screen for the carriers?
Yeah, they screen for them. So
Okay.
in my mind, that's just like in basketball when you run up and stop to like block the opposing team as you make the line to like drill in for, I don't know, a slam dunk or whatever. Those are all things. You double dribble. Don't double dribble.
No, a screen is definitely a thing in basketball, but I'm confused because
That's not how you were.
Well, no. I like what you said. I'm confused by you saying you're making it sound like the ships themselves are screening, but I was looking at it as like I've always heard the term smoke screen. Is that what you're referring to?
No.
Oh, so the two different things.
Yeah, so this was more they were describing, I think, as a deterrent. Like, I'm going to keep. So I don't know exactly how the rock, paper, scissors work, but from what I can basically understand is that you don't want to get too close to destroyers and cruisers if you are a small attack vehicle. Like, if you're a sub, you don't want to get right next to the destroyers and the light cruisers because they'll just take you out. So they're always running, like, diagonally to the carriers to keep the deterrent away. But I don't know if that's actually true. I made all of that up after reading through this stuff.
Check this out, listeners. I typed into the Google sphere, and a Reddit question popped up. It says, "What are the screens that are screening in terms of in the Navy?"
I did not ask this question on Reddit.
I know, but the top
wanna make sure, 'cause
the top answer is, "I have no clue. Thanks for the help." Interesting. I feel like a defensive tactic in which a picket or outpost are used to hide the nature and strength of a military force.
Okay, so that would kind of make sense. Because if the cruisers are, if we're talking about, multiple miles, right? So if you are like a mile in front of your carrier, then the sub can't get between the carrier and the destroyer. That would stop it, right, from being able to like really see the full strength of the fleet.
So yeah, that's the same thing that a smoke screen does.
Okay.
So they would send out.
We're talking about the same things. If you know the real answer, email us.
BattleBuddiesPod
Yeah,
at gmail.com. We love emails.
they're pretty great.
Yes. So on this game, World of Warships, like you can do smoke screens where you shoot out missiles and it blows up some water and creates all this steam so that you can't
Whoa.
see all of the ships behind there.
Okay.
I asked my brother as we were playing, I was like, "Did you guys do smoke screens?" He's like, "Fuck no, bro. That's like World War II shit. The fuck? We're not fighting other ships out
We
in
have
the Navy."
satellites. I can see over that now.
Because the thing is, and I'm not going to sit here like I know, but after playing a lot of these naval warfare video games that I've been really deep diving into and fucking loving, by the way, the hardest thing about all of this is figuring out the physics and the trajectory while two things are moving in
Right.
completely different directions, and you got to figure out at what speed, like, I got to aim over here because he's going to be going in. This ship is going to be going into my, where it's going to end up. It's a
Right.
whole thing. It's really difficult. So if you add a barrier of sight to that whole mixture, you're going to have less accuracy for your missiles.
Right, even if it's just a little bit.
Yeah.
They compound. Okay.
Yeah. We know what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're here.
Everyone just watched us figure that out actively.
Hey.
Break that down.
We're going to sound really legit here as I make up another thing. So another thing that this author said is that Japan's weakness, one of their main weaknesses was to the en passant attacks.
You said that. How are you saying French words perfectly, but you can't say archipelago?
These are chess phrases.
Oh.
This guy uses tons of phrases. Oh, that's the other thing. This guy doesn't translate, and he uses nonsense like French phrases like this all the time. And so but I like looking them up. But that was like a big complaint people had.
En passant.
En passant.
What does it mean?
So it means like in passing.
Oh.
So in chess, that happens with. It's like a scenario that happens with pawns. But essentially, what I think it means is that what Japan wanted, right, was they wanted to put landing strips like on every island conceivable, and then they wanted America to slowly have to comb through it and not be able to justify the cost. And so the strength that you can do is just fuck all of that and just like keep moving and get to the real targets.
Bypass.
Yeah, and then that.
Okay, that actually really helps because they're constantly talking about that in books. Like,
Yes.
they just bypassed all that shit. And I was
Yep.
like, okay, but why does that matter? And
It
you
matters
just
a
explained
lot.
that.
Yeah, it matters
Okay.
a lot. Because
Okay.
that's a good intel read. Because at first you're like, I should go stop this. And then the real answer is don't. Just keep going to your target. And that's part of what we'll talk about next time is Halsey's hits a decoy thing. And so it's a whole thing. And
Yeah, the decoy is crazy.
the decoy stuff's
When I
nuts.
learned, I was like, this sounds like a movie. Also, Steven Spielberg listens to our show.
Yeah.
Bro, make a movie about the Battle of Leyte Gulf.
Seriously.
I think the problem here is we call it the Battle of Leyte Gulf. It's really the War of Leyte
yeah.
Gulf. It's not a battle. It's an amalgamation of battles.
Yeah.
There's so many. It's 5,
Yeah.
technically, battles. And over the course of what? 4 or 5 days?
Yeah, it's like 3 days of battling. It
It-
depends on how you define it.
Yeah, well.
You could define it as just October 23rd and October 24th, but you're missing a ton of shit if you
Yeah,
do that.
that's if you and I just covered 2 days, people would be like, I don't get it.
Well, and because I was trying to prepare notes for next week, and there's a cruiser's gonna sink, or it's a cruiser or battleship, and it takes forever, and it's horrendous. And I'm like, I could do the whole show on just the sinking of this one boat because it's harrowing and it's like the most intense shit. But like we have to get into Halsey and like we have to get into all the other things. That's only a moment and it's a blip, and it's just a couple thousand people who die. Like,
Oh, just a couple thousand. Happy Memorial Day.
yeah, right. Seriously.
Goodness
or
gracious.
that there's like a great quote about that we'll read about. It's like he can't tell if it's more impressive they saved a couple thousand or that a couple thousand died. Like you can't figure out which one's more interesting.
Dude, that is the moral quandary of I think a lot of military commanders, where they have to sit there and be like, "That's a win, right?
Right.
Kind of
That's
a win.
exactly
in the
right.
win column?"
Yeah. Okay. But for most of the rest of today, we're gonna talk about these 2 submarines, and we're gonna talk about Top Gun a lot.
Oh yay!
Okay, I have some Top Gun questions here.
Did you watch it?
Not the new one, no. Watch the old one, and then Hannah and I, we walked around for a while tonight with our kids, talking about how to which characters from Top Gun fit which submarine captains. So
Interesting.
okay, we're
Have
gonna
you
talk
been
about
have you been walking your wife through all this stuff that you're learning?
not all of it because it's incredibly depressing.
I imagine she would get real annoyed real fast.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't give a shit about MacArthur, bro.
I keep trying to get her interested in MacArthur. She does not care about the guy, MacArthur.
Well, she's on the right. She's good. Good for her, dude.
Yeah.
I think she didn't have to read a bunch of books to figure out not to care.
Is that my takeaway? That I was mad at him for a while, and now I'm just like indifferent to his existence a little
He's
bit.
a person
Yeah.
that did things.
Yeah,
and
and
was
like-
there. Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about Darter and Dace. The landing of the U.S. 6th Army took place on October 20th. This was from Kincaid's 7th Fleet from the east. Remember, Kincaid and Halsey are the American guys in charge. Kurita, who's the Japanese commander we're going to focus on, was to go north of Palawan and then eventually go through the San Bernardino Strait and then south towards Leyte. Nishimura would go south of Palawan and then go north towards Leyte Gulf. Shima would reinforce Nishimaru, but they go separately. They're supposed to just meet up magically. And then Ozawa is going to be a distraction from the north. And we'll get into his a lot next time, and his is nuts. So their plan with like no communication was to just meet on October 25th. If you remember earlier, they only had a chance of winning by their own wargaming standards
2 days.
if they got there within 2 days. And their own calculations for getting there are 5 days later. So, at least for the commanders, there's no chance they win. Like, they know they
flowers of death.
Yeah,
death flowers. Just loving me some death flowers.
Yeah. So first they knew they were outside their 2-day window. 2, they obviously wanted to achieve the death bloom.
There you go.
Submarines Darter and Dace made contact with Kurita on October 23rd at 1:16. 1:16 is that how you say it? I'm really bad at military time.
That was great.
You say O?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a 0, but you guys say O.
Yeah, dude, you
Okay.
say it too. You're doing great.
Okay.
You sound like a salty dog.
In the Palawan Passage. So the Palawan Passage is a long island to the east of Leyte. To the south is the Balabac Strait, which would take you in between the south of Leyte and the north of this other island called Mindanao.
Mindanao.
Is that how people were saying it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mindanao. If you went north of Palawan, you would enter the Sibuyan Sea to the north of Leyte. So
Pull up a map.
right. I'm only saying those not so you like now in your head you have it all figured out, but those names kind of come back a lot. And so when I say them again, maybe you'll get a little more familiar. What matters here is their orders were to communicate and protect the Balabac Strait. And again, they were trying to control that strait because that strait led to the south of Leyte.
The Japanese were?
The Americans. This is the American submarines. They're
trying to control the strait.
They're trying to control the strait.
The strait is just essentially kind of like a narrow
passage.
Okay.
And it's like pretty rocky. No, that kind of goes north. But yeah, it's just a narrow passage.
Almost like a canyon, but water.
Yes. Yeah. We're doing this. We're crushing it. Okay.
No confusion whatsoever.
But after making contact with Kurita, they pushed fast to get ahead of the fleet for an attack. And it sounds like they did it immediately. It sounds like they were just like, fuck those guys. And then they just went for it. Their plan was to attack the force at dawn. Darter would attack the port column. The port is left. And Dace in front of the Darter was to attack the starboard column.
Right.
So some important notes. I'm going to call them D&D a lot now. So for Darter and Dace. D&D did not know this was Kurita, but was communicating information about the number of boats and navigational patterns. So they were trying to calculate out the zigzagging, which if you remember,
it's legit.
Spencer trying to figure out how to bomb in a video game or to fire a torpedo, it would help if he knew the zigzagging patterns.
For sure.
Yeah. The other thing to note, and this is still confusing to me, and I talked to my dad about it a lot today, and I didn't walk away knowing more. And that wasn't his fault. Him and I are both just trying to figure out how diesel fuel worked in the 40s with submarines and batteries and how long they lasted for.
Yeah.
So submarines at this time were largely surface vessels, but they went underwater for attack. But I don't think that's a rule because I think they just sit underwater later, but we'll get into that.
We call them, sounds like we should call them semi-submarines.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. My question. Obviously, these submarines, like this is Maverick, right? This is Maverick and Top Gun. This is not Iceman. They broke orders immediately. They had one fucking job. Your job is to not let anyone through this passage because it will really fuck us all in the long run. And they're like, got it. I heard you loud and clear, boss. And they're sitting there and they're like, oh, there's some boats going north. Let's just go follow them. Is that cool? You as an intel guy, like you as a human, let's not worry about what we know happens later. Is that what you do?
That to me sounds like a mistake.
Okay.
It sounds like they didn't realize something passing through, and they're like, "Oh shit, we better go follow that."
But they weren't passing through; they were going north, because Palawan Passage is like a north-south island, and the Balabac Strait is the south part of it. So they see the fleet going north, Kurita's fleet. So they go north to chase it, leaving the passage open.
Oh. Ooh.
Yeah.
Wait.
And we kind of celebrate this. Like, we celebrate this as an act of heroism. And they were, like, I'm not discounting them. Like, they are heroic for what they are about to do. Like, they have the biggest balls I've ever heard of, because they are not worried about depth charges or torpedoes or anti-submarine fire. But just from the get-go, was that cool? Like,
No, well, no. I mean, I get it. I'm really curious to figure out. You were recently just talking about chain of command, right?
yeah.
So who in their command? Because the thing is, if I'm some enlisted dude, and I'm like,
Right.
oh, we got to stay here all night. We got to guard the strait. And then captain comes in to me, he's like, we have to follow that ship. I'm like, I guess we're following that
Yeah,
ship.
for sure. It's not on the enlisted. But that's who I'm thinking of. Like, whenever I think of these things, I'm thinking of just the enlisted guy. That would be me, just sorting the mail.
Right.
Like, why are we turning? Like,
Right.
Like, we're doing what? We have a very like specific job, right? Like, the greater good. But this is America's an individualistic nation, right? And like, I can't tell if they're hotheads or if they're just like, they aren't going to be ready. Like, I don't know if it's like a true act of like, I'm worried about my northern friends, and so I'm going to chase this guy down.
Do you think it's a classic Harry Potterism where it's like, I must do what is right even though I might get in trouble?
I was thinking Inglourious Bastards when at the end he's like, I might get chewed out. I've been chewed out
More
before.
like a chewed out, man. River Dershi. Yeah, okay. All right. So, I mean, I don't know. At the end of the day, because I'm speaking from a Lance Corporal's point of view, which is a very low-ranking individual,
Right.
being like, I just do what I'm told.
Yeah.
But if I'm some fucking officer, I'm like, we're not today.
Yeah.
We're following that ship. River Dershi.
Right?
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I've never been the captain of
relative.
a boat, and I've never known a grand strategy in the continuations of it. So, like, maybe he's like, oh, shit, that's bigger than we thought. I really think that he was just like, I have a chance to do something right now.
Well, you asked, what would you have done? Let's say you are the captain of the Darter and Dace, which is a dope band name, by
Right?
the way.
Pretty cool.
Darter and Dace. June Carter Cat. I don't know. Would you follow them, or would you stand still and obey the orders?
As a kid, I think I would have been like, obviously, go help everybody by doing things. That's what you should do. That's what, in Clausewitz, the guy that I was talking about at the beginning, the Fog of War guy, he kind of is like that. Like, even if you preemptively do something and it's not great, that's still better than missing your window.
Initiative.
Yeah.
Taking initiative.
It matters in war, I guess. But
See,
as an adult, rewatching Top Gun last week with my wife, I'm like, Iceman was right about everything. And Maverick, you are dangerous. And technically, you didn't get Goose killed. But, like, you weren't doing great things to set up that situation. And I don't understand how jet streams work. But, you know, Goose was playing Great Balls of Fire, and you killed him. Hot take.
dude, you're not wrong. There's a scene where Iceman is in the locker room chewing on gum really obnoxiously.
Oh, man, he aggressively chews.
And he says, it's not your flying, it's your attitude.
It is.
Dude, he's not wrong.
Iceman the whole time, he's just like, just do things by the book because these airplanes are millions and millions of dollars.
We are in the military. So rules are a thing here.
I get that Iceman's movie would be very boring. Like, I followed the rules and then I did what I was supposed to do and I did good and the world is a little bit better than before I was born.
Spoiler alert. Iceman's in the new one.
Ah, that's dope. I'll watch it just
It's
for that.
fucking great, dude.
But then Hannah said, Hannah's my wife, and we were talking about this.
Hi, Hannah, if you're listening.
We were talking about this moment, and she brought up a point, which is, but what about at the end when Iceman says, you could be my wingman anytime? Is there something to, and we're assuming that Top Gun's personalities are real, transferable to high-ranking military strategy. Is there something to this flyboy type of mentality?
Like, so I guess your question is the point is there's two types of people in the military.
Right.
There are some types of people who are kind of like Nimitz, who would be like, I'm just going to follow the rules and keep my mouth shut. And then there's people like MacArthur that are like, we're fucking doing this.
Right.
I think that's what it comes down to.
Okay.
And like, what would I have done? Considering like, this is coming from a prior Marines perspective.
Right.
I was taught to just follow rules.
Right. You just see
Whereas
the rules.
I'm sure people in the Navy are taught more so along the lines of like, maybe we should use our brains though.
Right. I'm coming from I have crazy ADD and forget stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I've been, like, I just had the imagination of well, if I went and followed and somebody snuck through my strait, and then like they're calling me on the radio like, hey, did anyone get through? I'm like, oh God, I forgot, didn't I? I focused on the one thing like I do, and I forgot there's two things. And they're like, yeah, someone might have slipped through. Oh, okay, well, goodbye. I'm like, ah, damn it, that one's on me.
Man, dude, maybe there's something we don't know about this.
Yeah.
Maybe there was like some hella top secret shit, like Navy intelligence.
Yeah.
We're gonna follow some shit. We're gonna say that you're gonna stay here for this or whatever. I don't know.
I feel like this part gets yada 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 by everybody, including this guy who in this book I'm reading who doesn't yada 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 anything. He refuses. He fights every point, but on that one he's like, and then the captains went after the boat even though they were ordered not to. And I was like, well, that seems like you're gonna let that point slip, but you
We don't know.
You're gonna argue about the time it took to make an airplane, how that was inaccurate for a little bit, but you're gonna stay on this one. Or later on, he's like, it wasn't 25 torpedoes, it was 21. Like, that's not worth, like, that wasn't worth the 2 pages.
My mind is blown, and I view the World War II completely differently now.
Exactly.
Well, I do appreciate you, because I texted you within, like, the last couple of weeks, and I thought we were starting on the Sabian Sea.
Right.
But it's important that we start here, I think.
I think so.
It just goes to show everyone listening, and us included, just how much shit is involved with the Battle of Leyte Gulf.
Yeah, and I like this one because like there's that big debate of like, do you follow orders? Do you follow your own orders? And then this whole like the sequence, I think, is really interesting. So, Kurita's fleet was moving fairly slow at 15 knots. Again, they have no oil, and these armadas are huge. So like keeping all the oil going for all the boats is, I assume, horrible.
Now, this Kurita's fleet that's moving, we're following them currently, right?
Yeah, so they're moving a little bit north, I believe.
I just came up with this in my brain hole.
Yeah.
Maybe they're following them because they couldn't communicate with the people north to let them know that they were coming.
No,
No?
we'll get over that. We'll get into that.
Damn it.
And so their idea was they were gonna fight them at dawn, right? So they get overtaken at 5:25. Darter and Dace submerge at 0609, and Kurita's fleet was turning port because they were zigzagging when Darter then just fires 6 torpedoes at 980 yards, which is not very far.
No.
At Kurita's flagship, the Otago, which is nuts that they found the flagship, because when you look at these diagrams of how many boats there are, like, that's crazy. I may question the orders, but I'm not questioning like their steely resolve of being submariners. Like, they are badasses for this. Then it turns its stern tubes, which I don't understand the mechanism to do that.
So I'm learning a lot by playing World of Warships by this. But depending on, man, I'm not going to use this. I'm not going to use the correct terminology. So I apologize for anyone listening that was turning turrets and battleships. Yeah. Depending on where your like port side is,
yeah,
the left side of your ship,
yep,
in relation to where you're trying to aim, you can be able to aim more guns depending on where the left side of your ship is in relation to where you're trying to hit.
Okay.
It's hard to explain.
But they were firing their stern, so did they like do a one? I think in my mind they were Tokyo drifting it. Like,
yeah, sure. Well, I don't know about, you're saying like they're moving like this?
Yeah, well, they went and then they like did a drift and like did a 180 almost and then fired their stern side. Or did they just go in front?
No, I don't know. No, the whole name of the game with shooting off torpedoes and things like that, you got to be
fast, right?
You got to be coming on your side. Like,
okay.
You can't be doing it straight on, I don't think.
Okay.
With 6, nah.
Okay. Nah. That makes sense.
At least in my mind. And again, this is coming from somebody who plays video games.
Yeah.
I'm not.
So then at 0633, the Otago was hit by 4 torpedoes.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's for all the accuracy stuff I read.
You said out of 6, right?
Yeah.
That's a winning shot.
Is this video game stuff? Like, you got it? Like,
bro, my brother and I were playing earlier. Like, if you can get it to where you get 6 shots off, if 3 of those hit, you're like, whoo.
Well, no, because so many of them in this era in the World War II stuff we were reading, especially in Leyte Gulf, they just miss because they're so hard.
All the time you're missing.
One dude almost blows himself up.
Oh, God, dude.
Just a little bit later in this battle, like not in this exact exchange, but a couple hours later, one guy's going to fire it, but he's going to fire it pretty close, like 1,000 feet or whatever. It misses, it rearms back towards him, and it gets within 10 yards of his own boat.
Oh, my God, dude. So
imagine your stomach right there. Like,
no, dude. I literally felt myself almost shit myself.
Yeah, like,
my butthole just puckered real fast. Like, I have such a profound new respect for just naval warfare from learning about all this and from playing World of Warships.
Yeah.
It's difficult as shit. And extreme turns out very dangerous.
That makes sense. So, okay, 1 minute later, the Takayo was hit by 2 torpedoes off her rudder and her propellers. Then the destroyers moved in for a counterattack. But at 06:57, Dace fired 4 torpedoes at the Maya. One reported that I think this is a Japanese report, that the Maya literally just disintegrated, which is nuts.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah. Because of how slow some of these other boats in this battle are going to sink. Like, one takes like multiple hours, and then it kind of sinks. And this one just goes away.
Sometimes they tow ships back to port.
Right, And that just happened before the Battle of Leyte Gulf. We won't go into that. That's confusing. Kurita's fleet then increases to 24 knots. From what I understand, this is as fast as their fleet can go. 24 knots.
Okay.
And they try to get clear of D&D. And then the Ashashimo, which is essentially the new flagship of the fleet, comes alongside the Tago and picks up Kurita and his staff. The story goes, and I don't know if this one's verified, that Kurita is swimming. Like, he literally had to swim.
I heard that.
Had to get him.
I heard that.
So
is that...
I don't know if that's true or not. Big if true.
Yeah, huge if true. It wouldn't be swimming. He'd be chilling on one of those flotation devices and kicking.
And then Kurita took over the Ashimo at 0700. Eventually, he's going to take over the Yamato, and that becomes the new flagship.
The largest battleship ever made.
Yeah. And that's after their original Admiral Yamamoto, right?
Well, because it's Yamamoto, and this ship's called the Yamato.
Yamamoto is the guy who created the Pearl Harbor attack.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that guy's nuts. Okay. So, incredibly brave. Like, they got within 1,000 yards and then fired off 1,000,000 torpedoes at multiple ships.
This arguably, like, it's like when you watched Rogue One, the Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
And K2SO is like, he like sacrifices himself.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, bro, K2SO saves the universe.
He does. He's the reason why.
So it's that kind of shit. When you see this, it's like, they changed the course of the war.
Right.
Like, it's little things like this where you're like, if this never happened, what?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, I was telling Hannah, like, my take is that there's no way now, because they got all hits, that the Navy's ever going to condemn these actions. Because no enlisted guy is going to want to get on a boat and do something heroic when, like, but you didn't like Darter and Dace hitting 1,000,000 boats with torpedoes because they didn't follow some orders. So they kind of, like, I don't think they can say anything now. Like, they did their job. And I wonder if they're coming up, you know, they're submerging to get the attack. Like, we better fucking hit some shit. Like, or else we're going to get in trouble for this, guys.
We're going down.
Yeah. Okay. D&D were not done. They went down to hide until night. This again, I'll just pause right here. I didn't think they could go underwater for that long. Like, are they literally hiding? Are they still moving?
I know who we could ask about that. Redacted.
Hey, Redacted.
Yeah, no, dude, I don't know much about submarines. I don't know. You literally sitting here being like, I didn't know they could be under that long. I'm like, oh, they can't be under as long as they want?
This is new information for me, too. Before reading the book, I was like, clearly they stayed underwater and killed everybody. But no. Okay.
Huh.
Yeah. So at 2015, they surfaced. And Darter submitted a report, presumably to Halsey. Then Darter tried to get ahead, missed, and went starboard for an hour. This is important because he's going to...
Is this Darter the report that they submitted to Halsey, is this another yada yada moment? Like, what were you? What'd you guys say? Like, hey, by the way.
Oh, this before they were stoked. We shot all of them. This dude disintegrated.
We're batting 300.
Yeah. So they are traveling 17 knots, and then they hit the Bombay Shoal. So they essentially beached themselves because they were traveling. Then Dace tried to tow them, but it failed. And because the Bombay Shoal is so like tricky, it takes 2 hours to get the crew off. And
it's like hella dangerous coral.
yes,
Like, yeah.
it's a shoal. Yeah, it's like it's rough. It takes them 2 hours to get the crew off onto the other boat, the Dace, and then it takes them fucking forever to eventually. It's a couple of days later they go and they try to blow up the ship and they can't blow it up because the submarine's so well made they can't blow it
Word?
up. Yeah, and so like
I love that.
but they're like freaking out. They're like, the Japanese can't get this boat. Like, we're winning because we took their boat slowly, and so if they just get another boat, that's bad. And so they eventually get somebody to blow it up, and it's pretty funny. So, okay, so right now it's sounding good for Darter and Dace. Besides the marooning their boat, which is whatever. It's hard to see underwater.
I would imagine.
But Darter and Dace did give Nishimura unobserved access to the Balabac Strait, which was the fear of the order, right? So because they were north and because they were doing all this stuff, Nishimura, who is one of the three fleets or one of the three, pincers, they now can go through the strait and no one knows that they went through the strait. And to me, how do you weigh that?
I hope it was worth it.
Yeah, I just don't know. Sure, it's heroic that they killed people, but it's war, so I'm going to go over that part. They did do a heroic thing. They potentially saved more American lives, which is what their job is at this time. But they did leave their post, and somebody went through.
Bro, what was one of the first things that you learn before you even go to boot camp? You have to learn there's a bunch of rules of standing post.
Okay.
And number one is don't leave your post.
The first one. But then when you're like you were saying, though, because they have captains, because they're on boats. They're not like people in foxholes. And so the captain has more leeway, especially on submarines.
Yeah.
They have their own set. I watch Crimson Tide a lot. And Denzel Washington, he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. It's not the right call.
Yeah, Denzel Washington was like, bunch of steel. Right. Oh, wait, that's Hunt for Red October.
Yeah, it's Hunt for Red October.
I know, I'm just fucking with you.
I was like, what? How do you mix them up?
Those are two completely different people and different movies.
And what do they do on Crimson Tide? They talk about horse breeding. That's like the running
I've not
thing.
seen Crimson Tide.
No?
Is it good?
Dope.
Really?
So
Is this
good.
a submarine movie?
Yeah, it's Gene Hackman and Denzel
I love
Washington.
Gene Hackman.
They're both captains. And
I should watch that.
Of the Alabama.
The USS?
Yeah.
Variety?
And they get half of a report, and it looks like they want them to fire a nuclear bomb.
What?
And so they're just having...
This movie sounds wonderful.
It's awesome. It's so tense.
This is 90s?
Yeah.
I'm watching
Maybe
it.
early 2000s.
I believe Some of All Fears has some submarine action in it, too.
I haven't watched Some for All Fears in a long time.
Me neither. But I remember enjoying it.
Yeah. Also, okay, what was it like when the Dace tried to tow? What does it look like when one submarine tries to tow another submarine? Because you and I rented a U-Haul last weekend, and I didn't tell you this because you had left, but I had to return it.
How'd that go?
Well, I pull up to the U-Haul place, and I'm like, hey, I'm just here to unhitch my trailer that I've never driven before. And
Go ahead and put it back out over
he
there.
said, all right, put it in any of the spots. And I swear to God, I have to put it in the spot myself. I have to back it up into the spot. Yeah, just any of the million spots we have. All right, I'll go do that right now. He looks at me, he's like, do you want me to come out to unhitch your trailer? Yeah, I would love if you came out to unhitch my trailer, man. That'd be fantastic. And I go, and it's confusing if you haven't backed up a lot of trailers.
Dude, it's rough.
How quickly do you turn? How quickly do you not turn?
Right is left, left is right.
Yeah.
What's happening here?
But only for a little bit.
Dude.
And I did it. It took me 5 minutes.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, it was two songs, two punk songs. So I was like, okay, I'm doing this. And then And the guy fucking looks at me. He's like, "You're in between two spots. You got to do it again."
No!
Like, fuck you, man.
Did he really?
Yeah, he made me
Bro.
do it again.
So just so the listeners we had to bring a couch to Kevin's house. And when Kevin came and like parked the trailer in front of his house, his neighbor came out and was like, "Good job, buddy."
God, that's the worst.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, you, Mr. Truckman, grew up in Vacaville. Like, how does that feel? I can tell you how it would feel for me, but how did it feel for you with like your masculinity being like, I own a truck, I cannot pull a trailer?
It was good. It was.
Oh.
I needed the sweat. I needed to have.
You needed humility, is what you needed.
I was humbled, and I was like, okay, this is good for me because this won't happen again. Because when I buy a trailer, I'm going to the industrial park out in the outskirts of Vacaville by Kaiser, and I'm just going to drive around and practice. Yeah,
That's actually a really
that's how I
good
learned how
call.
to drive stick.
Right,
And
same.
I started doing
Same.
that. So, yeah.
In my mind, my like hilarious mind, I'm imagining submarines underwater,
For sure. And like I know now that they were probably they're
They're above-
underwater,
they're above water.
and they have the tow cable, and he's
Right.
like, you have to go left, left, and he's doing that thing
some
where
guy
like,
in scuba gear giving him like, come on, back up, further right.
and it's really like people like point and like they pretend like they're turning the wheel in the
Yes.
rearview mirror, and that doesn't make sense to me when I'm doing the trailer. Like, are you saying left or like the trailer left, but I go right? And so like in the submarine, like my port or your port?
You're like, isn't it a leap year? What's happening? I'm so confused.
No.
You know what? This is perfect.
Right.
Trying to back up with a trailer is basically what Leyte Gulf is. It's just very confusing.
I was thinking, I was like, man, this is a lot like when Spencer tried to explain the Kurds to me. Battles in this era of the Dreadnought were heavily reliant on intel and the ability to communicate. And that's because the way that I see it is that there was the age of the sail, which is obviously boats that are under the power of wind, sails. And then you have these battleships. That's the beginning of the Dreadnought era through the Industrial Revolution, ending with carriers. And then it will end into the next era once the first nuclear subs are out. But the thing about the Dreadnought era, especially the later Dreadnought era, once we have carriers, is I did not realize how many fucking boats are in the water at one time. Like, swimming around and, like, fighting each other. Like, I didn't know there was 150 boats on just America's side. That's so many boats for, like, this little piece of island to, like, try to fight for. The amount of communication you should have is a lot, right? Like, you should have a lot of clear flow. You should have some flow charts, like up on your wall in your commander's quarter. Like, okay, in this fleet, this person does this, but they just don't seem to have that.
No, which is interesting because naval intelligence is such a well-renowned, sought-after organization. I mean, like I said, I was in Marine Corps intelligence. I went to a Navy school.
Yeah.
In Virginia.
That makes sense.
It's also interesting during this era of the Dreadnought that this was the last ever battleship war.
Right.
Like, we don't have those anymore.
No. We started going real quiet underwater.
It's pretty, like, learning about all this is pretty...
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
It's pretty... It seems pretty archaic.
Yes.
To learn about the fact that these dudes are... Can you imagine opening up the newspaper? Well, first of all, people don't do that anymore. Can you imagine scrolling through your phone and being like, yeah, man, I'm trying to think of some battleships out there. The United States was, launching missiles in the South China Sea.
Right.
No,
No.
that's not going to happen. We might drop some bombs.
Right.
But we're not launching missiles at each other via battleships.
Yeah, no, boats aren't like circling each other.
No.
Like,
and it's crazy for those of you who haven't seen, like, Google image some Battle of Leyte Gulf. You see all these insane maneuvers that these ships are doing, and you see these intense white streams of ocean just like trailing them. It's really intense. Like you said, like 150 ships all in like a crazy amount of air. Like
Yeah.
it's just nuts to see. The scope is insane.
Well, and like, because 24 knots, that's almost like 40 miles an hour, right? Something like that.
Man.
And that's pretty fast for these giant boats that like can't slow down. Like, they have no brakes. They're in the water.
Slowing down in World of Warships
Real issue.
is a whole thing, bro.
All right. So here's where we're going to talk about the intel of that whole exchange, because that was the exchange. I think the exchange is really interesting. On Japan's side, Yamato saw a D&D at 0250, which is way earlier than I would have thought. If you would have asked me, when did they see them? I said right before they fired their torpedoes, clearly. And the answer to that is no. They saw them about an hour after Darter and Dace saw them. So they saw them the entire time they were overtaking them. But what's weird is that Kurita didn't see them, but they're in the same fleet. So like they had to have communicated at some point. And the question becomes, why the fuck didn't they get their cruisers and their destroyers going with like depth charges and all the normal anti-submarine munitions? Like, why did they not start a counterattack until after Darter and Dace started firing 5 hours after the initial contact? 4 hours, yeah, because there was 4 hours in between Japanese contact and them actually firing torpedoes. That doesn't make sense to me. That's crazy. And that's like an unanswered question. Like, we don't know why.
Yeah, I have no idea.
And this author who goes into everything was just like, it's really weird.
Yeah, then that means nobody knows, dude.
Yeah.
That
So
means no clue. Let's see here.
at 0620, to answer your question, so before they fired, they did give Halsey intel from the subs. So they gave them intel before they were firing about, or like right after they fired, on how many they saw on the fleets and what their formations were doing, like what their zigzagging patterns were.
Mm-hmm.
But then they kept going after them. But they were communicating with Halsey most of the time, it looks like. There's no reason for them not to, even though transmissions are getting intercepted by both sides.
Did anybody tell them to stop?
I don't know what Halsey's responses were. Halsey's weird with his communication. That comes up in the next one.
Sounds like it. Sounds like communication here. It sounds like there was definitely a lapse in communication here.
Yeah. And then
4 hours.
4 hours is a long ass time.
Yeah.
And then Naval High Command at this time, October 23rd, they only knew about 2 of the 6 Japanese sea forces at this time, because they didn't catch the one that went through the
Strait. 2 of 6 seems like a failing grade to me.
Seems like a failing grade. So
Don't love that.
that's where I want to end it with, because we started with there's no way America should lose in terms of numbers. Like, they have all the boats, and Japan has none of the boats.
We need a bigger boat.
Yeah, I need a bigger boat than this. But at the end, Japan got boats through. They're going to battle Leyte Gulf. They're going to battle in these straits, and that's not going to be great for America. They're going to kind of get caught up in some stuff now. It's weird.
I wonder what. Yeah, I'm curious to learn about some revisionist history where they don't leave the strait.
Yeah, right? I wanted to wargame with you. If I could, I read that handbook on wargaming because I wanted to like construct a scenario where we are the submarines, and like one of us submarine, one of us Japan, but it turns out wargaming at a professional level is difficult.
What?
Yeah. You need a judge.
Do people go to like school for that and shit?
That's right. There's a professorship of the wargaming department in Annapolis.
That's sick.
Oh, my brother and I were trying to get me that
God,
job.
that's
Like,
sick.
this is the coolest job.
Yeah, dude, could you and I not get like a little nice a map probably the size of this thing right here and get some fake ships and submarines and do some fun stuff?
Oh yeah, we can do it now. I read through it. I got it.
Yeah, let's do. I want to do that. We'll make a video and we'll put it on our Twitch.
Yeah.
We just have to make a Twitch and figure out how to use that first.
It's technology. It's easy, right?
Maybe we'll do it on MySpace.
Let's get a little MySpace going.
Yeah, dude. Oh man, so that's the Battle of the Palawan Passage.
Yeah.
That's day 1.
That's day 1.
I'm calling it day 0. Ground 0.
Day
Palawan
0?
Passage.
Yeah, Palawan Passage.
Even though technically it's like day 15,000 of, I don't know.
It's year 3.
Yeah. Yeah. To next week, are we doing a current conflicts?
Yeah, next week we're going to do current conflicts.
So in 2 weeks, we will be at the Battle of the Sibian Strait, or the Sibian Sea, excuse me. Yeah?
Yeah, and we're going to read all about, what's that ace pilot guy? We're going to read about this nuts-ass pilot.
On the American side?
Yeah. It's him and his buddy, his wingman, and they take out so many
Bro, I'm
fucking
telling you,
planes.
dude, these pilots are savage.
Yeah, this guy's nuts.
Yeah, any other things that we want to cover before we go?
No, I'm so confused.
Thank you for listening to
Yeah.
another episode of Battle Buddies. We appreciate you. Just again to remind you, we are on the Twitter at Battle Buddies 4. We have an Instagram that's just super popping these days.
Yeah.
Battle_buddies_pod.
It was great because my coworker found it and then said, "Hey, you do all this stuff on ISIS and Al Qaeda, and just make sure that those aren't the 4 people following you," because it was all in Arabic. And I was like, "Whoa, little racist." And then I thought about it.
Good call.
I was like, I'm going to look at that just to make sure. Because you're right, I can't read Arabic.
That is not the worst idea.
And that is my hashtag. My hashtag is Boko Haram of like my one post I have on
Is
it.
it?
I was like, I should probably check that out. Make sure that's cool.
Yeah. Day 1 of the intern at the FBI is like, I'm just going to do a little search of hashtag Boko Haram and see what comes up.
No one's this dumb.
Yeah, right. But yeah, we appreciate all you guys who have been listening. If this is, feel free to give us any feedback on how this episode treated your ear holes.
Yeah.
And we will see you next week for an At Ease Current Conflicts, where we learn about what's happening now.
Everything's great.
Everything's always good.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.